Willkommen, bienvenue, and welcome. I'm Rob Doherty, and this is the FSTVS Podcast Executive Edition, supported by Liberi Consulting and hosted by Julian Scott, the animation consultant for Film London. In this podcast series, we'll be chatting to the movers and the shakers in the animation industry, and discovering a little bit more about what they do, how they got there, their thoughts on the animation industry, and I hope get to meet the person behind that executive title. Our guest joining Julian this week is the visionary entrepreneur and all-round captivating human, Neil Court. From his start in journalism, Neil took an opportunistic sharp turn into TV sales and didn't look back. And that clarity of vision when it came to seeing opportunities is what led Neil from success to success in the business. From being MD at Nelvana in the 80s and 90s to founding Decode Entertainment, which, along with a couple of mergers here and there, became DHX Media, which in turn became Wildbrain. More recently, he spent a decade as executive chairman at 9 Story Media. If ever there was a fantastic example of taking opportunities when you see them, this is it. And Neil gives a fascinating insight into that and his career in general. And take good note of his sage advice towards the end of the podcast.
Neil, I think it's fair to say you are a media entrepreneur. Over the last 10 years or so, you've been working with private equity partners to invest in, grow and sell major media companies in the worldwide children's sector, and also been involved in factual companies here in the UK and Canada. Probably Scholastic's recent US $185 million acquisition of 9 Story is the most obvious one of your successes. But your career began in TV sales and distribution with Nelvana in the late 80s. You've been a TV distribution and co-production consultant in the children's sector for clients like Jim Henson Company, Film Roman, MCA, ITEL, and Polygram. Welcome to the FSTVS podcast.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
So you were a co-founder of Decode, which became Wildbrain. When you were in sales and co-productions, many people, including myself, thought you were the most effective TV salesman in the business. But you actually studied journalism in Canada. What got you into TV?
Well, I was a failed journalist. So I was early. It was the early '80s in Toronto, and I was scrapping around trying to find work. And a friend of mine who worked in the ad business invited me out for free drinks with the owner of her company. And of course, we never turned out a free drink, so I came along, and we ended up in a very stush bar, very nice bar in Toronto, and it was absolutely packed, no seating. Now, in prior life, when I was in uni in the summers, I was working in bars as a host and as a bouncer. So I knew bars. I knew how they worked and how it flowed and all that, and people were coming and going. And so we're standing there looking around in this jammed bar, and I saw a table. I saw people getting ready to leave. So I ran over, grabbed the table. By the time I got there, people had left. And I waved my group over, which was my friend, and her boss, this guy. This guy who was also a big TV and film guy in Toronto at the time. And he interpreted not that I'd worked in bars and I was sort of that kind of bad sort who hung around in bars too much, but I was aggressive and I was assertive. And therefore, I'd probably make a good salesman. So he effectively offered me a job in his TV company selling TV shows, which was stuff they imported as well as stuff they made. So that's really how I started, because there was no work going as in journalism. So that's how I got going in TV distribution. So it really started that first year or so, I'd be getting on a plane early in the morning, flying up to Northern Ontario, going to a one-stick town and flogging movie packages and TV shows. And I would basically work my way across the country, hopscotching to the west of Canada. And I would do that on a regular basis and go east and all that. Going to these small towns with single stick stations, flogging programming in the early 80s. And that's how I got my start. And then my boss, who was this owner's brother, left. And I moved up starting doing national accounts, and included going to LA, where I was seeing producers, to get Canadian rights to movies they're making, things like that. And that was awesome. That was amazing. Schlepping around LA with my brick mobile phone and a convertible, going around from film set to film set. It was absolutely amazing. So I was absolutely wedded to the TV business by that time.
I think to be an effective and a good salesman, you've got to believe in the IP that you're pitching. And it's interesting that you said that this guy who offered you the job thought you were assertive, and I think the word you used was aggressive. But I think you're probably the least aggressive person I've ever met in my life. So the IP that you were selling, did you just really believe in what you were doing?
Well, there's a school of salesperson in TV who very much comes from the I don't smell them, I just sell them school. Okay. That's not me. I mean, I can't help but be enthusiastic about programming that I really love, like a project I really love. And I guess that comes across just the natural enthusiasm, and people, that rubs off, and people would really dig that and like that. And that really helps you get gigs, I think, with get sales done, and people see your genuine enthusiasm. And the best projects, the projects that are most successful that I was involved with, are probably the ones I love the most. And it just, human nature, you can't help but react to positively or to things you really love, and negatively to things you don't. So I probably was pretty bad at selling projects I didn't like, but good at projects I did like. And luckily, the people with various people I worked for, most of what they did was good.
And were there, looking back to your younger days, were there any projects any shows that you remember as a kid that influenced what you got enthusiastic about?
I was a huge, I would say American sitcom junkie growing up in Canada in the 60s. So I used to love like Beverly Hillbillies, Green Acres, it's these brilliantly written, punchy shows. And I just always loved shows that are so well constructed, great characters and all that. So I was never like a big TV kid growing up, but there were certain things that really stood out. And I liked what I liked. And I think over time in television, you just develop instincts for shows that are going to work. And typically it would be things I just liked.
Yeah, and you mentioned writing there as well as being, kind of key to what you enjoyed about those sitcoms back in the day. As a salesman, as somebody doing the distribution of shows, I'm assuming you got involved with the creative process fairly early on. And some creators and producers can be quite protective of their ideas. They don't like people coming in and telling them what they think they should be doing. How did you navigate that? Because you must have incredible knowledge of the market with everything you were doing, talking to buyers all the time. How did you then translate that into, I don't know, maybe tweaking something creatively with a producer?
Yeah, well, I would get, things that were obviously cultural no-nos. I would get back to people in this, but I have a couple of funny stories. Like early in my Nelvana days, I had a colleague in LA who was pitching me a show. He wanted me to go out and pitch. And it was called Joust. I said, what do you mean Joust? I said, well, it's a game show. I developed it, and we're gonna, these two guys get outside of the ground, and they joust with each other. I said, okay, why is this so good? Oh, they're gonna love this in England. They're gonna love this in France. They're gonna, they love this stuff in Europe. I said, okay, I got a show for you to pitch. Salem is witch burning. They're gonna love it over there. I said, what are you talking about? As well as part of American history. So I threw it back at him, just that, right. I kind of got it sort of got. I said, this is as culturally relevant. Joust is culturally relevant over here, because this happened like hundreds of years ago, as Salem witch burning is to you. Like, get real. So I tend to get I throw back as good as I got, actually, when something I found just really totally off, not right.
No, fair enough. Having said that, I don't know. Nowadays, if we had celebrity jousting, it might ring a bell. Something.
It could be. I just would be a show that I could sell.
Well, I won't pitch it to you. I'm going to write it up when we finish this.
Okay, no, go ahead. I'll pitch you the Salem show.
Thank you very much. I mean, obviously, again, you said, you could sell shows that you were very enthusiastic about. Were there any shows that you passed on that you then regretted?
Yeah, well, I mean, at Decode, this is what I'd come across things that I'd have to kind of sell internally, and one show I wasn't able to sell internally was the Gruffalo. The Gruffalo was, as you know, this basically made Magic Like Pictures, Michael Rose and Martin Pope. It made their company. And this was something that I came across early because we had a very close relationship with Macmillan, the book publishers. We were optioning shows that we turned into live action series. So we were really tight with them. And they showed me the Gruffalo early days, like before publication. And I took it back to my colleagues in Toronto and I said, this is really great. And my wife read it, and we had a kid at the time, just, young kid, and a lot of enthusiasm. But I just couldn't get them to buy in, and that this is the problem. You can't get if you can't get buy-in, you can't get something made, and it didn't. I just couldn't get the people there bought into it, and of course it went off to be a great success. So that was something I regretted, not because I passed on it, but I couldn't get my company online to go for it.
And I guess if you can't get the buy-in from your colleagues and your people that you work with on a day-to-day basis, it's going to be a non-starter, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah.
Especially because I wasn't there, because I was working over here, and Decode was based in Toronto, and I could only be there for so long. Like I was there for a week at a time or whatever. Then I ended up flying back here. So you have to kind of be on the spot if you really want to push something, make something happen.
No, sure. And I mean, Decode is a fantastic segue into what I was going to ask you next, actually. Now, Janet Balmforth at Liberi Consulting, who I know you know, told me that you announced the formation of Decode, maybe having had a glass or two of rosé, whilst you were coming down the stairs of the Jim Henson boat in Cannes with your co-founder, Stephen Deneur. And your exact words were, "We're getting married." Right.
Yeah, so that was a end of, I think, a long process for both Stephen and I. I mean, we kind of mirrored each other in our careers as we were building our careers in Canada. Him on the production side, me on the distribution side. We knew each other, but not that well. And it was probably took me a few years before I decided to start our own production company. And it was really because as a consultant, it's a tricky world being a consultant. As you said, I was working with Jim Henson, Film Roman, and it was a great time. The 90s were a fantastic time for selling animation around the world. And I was lucky. I was pretty good at it, and I had represented great companies. So I was doing really, really well. And the way that the deals were constructed, I would get a piece of whatever I did, including and the distribution divisions I had set up for these companies. And it was getting to the point where I was getting the level of compensation I was receiving was starting to hurt the clients. And not hurt, but they thought, well, we could hire people for less than all this. And so from Film Roman especially, they would say to me every year, well, come on, we can't keep doing this. This deal doesn't make any sense for us. You're going to have to come in-house. And I would say, that's fine. We'll just part ways. No hard feelings. And they say, no. Let's do this for another year. So I kind of have to call their bluff. And I thought, after a couple of years, I said, this is not good. I can't keep calling people's bluff. I'm going to have to own what I sell. I can't just be an agent. So I had been thinking about this for some time, for 2 or 3 years, as a kind of how am I going to keep going self-preservation? You can be kind of too successful in what you do. And I thought, well, I got to have my own production company. And it happened to be the time when tax credits were really coming alive in Canada, that things really started to happen there. As you know, things started to really get made there a lot in the 90s. And being Canadian, it was something that I wanted to do. And I had to find a partner, a Canadian production partner in Canada. And it was literally, it happened that night on the Henson boat, because I was working with Henson, and Steve Deneur, who had just recently left Alliance, was sitting there. We sat and we were saying, well, what are you going to do next? He said, well, I really like kids' business, and because they'd had some kids' shows. And I said, oh, funny you say that, because I'd like to start a Canadian production company. Why don't we talk about doing this together? So we literally cooked up the idea of Decode that night. And hence, coming down the steps rather drunkenly, saying to Janet, "We just got married. We're starting a company." It truly did happen like that.
And it was, it was a great marriage, because Decode went on to do the most incredible amount of really, really high quality programming. Are you still married with Stephen?
No, he's a good friend. I mean, we see each other a lot, and he ended up becoming a big competitor, because of course he ended up running DHX, which was the predecessor of Wildbrain, And I was executive chairman of 9 Story. So we were like the big rivals in town. And it kind of came to a head when we had a panel together at Kid Screen. And we were it was like gladiatorial combat. You know, we were just absolutely at each other, hammer and tongs. It was very entertaining, apparently.
I have to see if they've got that online somewhere. I have to look at it. Now, I know you're also a great mentor of, a sort of great advocate of mentoring and training and creating a positive company culture. And it's interesting because over the years, you've managed some very successful people. Josh Serber, who now runs Wildbrain, Dominic Bizet, Netflix, and fellow Festivus podcast victim Dan Phil, who runs Darkslope. How do you go about mentoring and creating that positive corporate culture? And why do you think it's that important?
Well, I would have to say that I don't think I've met. I honestly think I haven't mentored anybody. No one ever mentored me. It's influences, right? And so I would say rather not so much mentoring and training, more enabling and empowering. So you find great people, which I did with Dominique and Josh, and then who were direct reports to me, and you give them a job and you say, here's what give you what do you need, give you what you need. Here's the job, and go do it in the style that you can do it. And here are the targets. And you do that once you know people pretty well that they're going to be quite exceptional at what they do. So it's really coming down to picking the right people and then kind of letting them get on with it and then supporting them. And that's what I did with Dominique and Josh.
How do you pick the right people? What are you looking for?
That's a good question. I mean, Dominique, we were looking for a distribution person. I hired her when she was 25. She's working at BBC at the time in Toronto. And I'd heard from for the grapevine that she was really good at what she did. And I thought she had tremendous potential. And I met her and Steve met her. And we just kind of went with our instinct that we hired her. And she was brilliant at what she did. And there she is now as a key executive at Netflix. And Josh was was originally our tape guy at Decode, working for Dominique, doing servicing. And he was just really clever, solid guy and smart. I got to know him over the years before we brought him into sales. And it was funny because Dominique, when I was leaving DHX, which is what Wildbrain became, I had kind of identified Dominique as the person to take over for me. And she took over. She was going to take over, and then she left. She went going to Super Écran in Montreal because before she went to Netflix. And so I left, and then Josh had come up, had replaced Dom for about a year. And then I said to Josh, I said, well, how's it going replacing, stepping into Dom's shoes and all that? And he said, oh yeah, it's good. It's been tough, but okay, right. Well, you're ready to take the next step now. Yeah, because I'm leaving. So you've got to take over for me. So he had a pretty accelerated executive development at DHX. So he went from being like a junior salesperson within a little over a year running the whole show. So that was, he's brilliant at it.
When we were chatting earlier on, you mentioned sort of serendipity and how careers can, you can do your best to have a career plan, but an awful lot of it is, frankly, luck and being in the right place at the right time. And it sounds a bit like that was exactly what happened to Josh. Do you think that, that's a part of what's happened to you over the years, that sort of serendipitous moment?
I would say so. I mean, I think it just being where stuff happens really matters. And also being, as we chatted about earlier, just being decent, treating people well. And that's with people at all levels of the organization, right? It's too many times that people who, as they go up the corporate ladder, they sort of, I call it, kissing up and kicking down. That people are really, really, incredibly ingratiating with people above them and really shitty to people below them. And this is not, obviously, it's nothing I ever subscribe to. This is something that you don't treat people that way. And you have to be really well liked by everybody. and treat people well. And that, I guess, has been one of my basic rules is just be decent, be a decent person, don't be a dick. Just be respectful of people, no matter where they are in the organization.
And when you moved from sales and DHX and you started to get into corporate investment, was some of that sort of the personalities in a company that you and your partners are going to invest in, were the personalities at the top of that, right the way down through the company, as important as the finances?
Yeah, I would say that. The company had to be a solid company. It was going places and all that. But what we looked for, I would say, was vision. First off, real vision and ambition. That these, obviously you come in with money, you just don't want people who are going to think they're going to take a check and leave, or that that they're as ambitious as you are for the company. That they've got a real vision of where they want to go, and they want to get it much bigger than they are. I think this is a fundamental for that kind of work for investing in companies.
And do you think, right now there's a lot of companies out there who I'm sure are looking for investment, looking for backing, getting over a slightly difficult period in our industry where the commissioning's dried up a little bit. What do you think studios and companies can do things to make themselves investor ready, make themselves more attractive to investors?
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to how a company needs to be well run. We can do a bit. When we came into 9 Story, myself and my partners at Zelnick Media Capital, there were certain things we wanted to fix and structure and all that. But ultimately, it was a really well-run company. And you want to just look good. You want to look sharp. It's like putting on a sharp suit and all that. You just have to be impressive. Otherwise you're not going to really get a look at. Have good people at different levels of the organization. Clearly there are things that are going to have to be fixed and improved, but the fundamental things have to be there in terms of financial management, marketing, things like that. Because that's what attracts investment to begin with is that you're well run and you're growing well.
And do you? I don't know all the companies that you've been involved with over the last sort of 10 years or so, but there are studios, certainly animation studios, which are founded by a creator, maybe a single creator or a partnership, and maybe it's been founded on one piece of IP that's been very successful, and they're looking to grow, but in order to grow, maybe they're going to have to let go of some of the things that they've managed themselves, that they're just used to doing everything, because that's what you do when you start a company up. You buy the coffee, you do the sales, you make the shows. So how do you encourage somebody who's like a founder creative to allow them to let go a little bit in order for that business to expand?
Well, I think that's something you check as you come in to make sure that there isn't that they understand that they're going to have to delegate in order to grow. And I think this comes down to the ambition point. If people are ambitious, they realize that they're going to have to expand the team, let go, bring specialists in to do different things. If they're going to be thinking like they're a one man shop, they're not investable. This is not a company that is going to go anywhere. And that. They just have to have the right mindset going in. And you realize that from having lots of conversations with people that ambition will be married with an ability to evolve the company and evolve the organization.
And does that require a little bit of the investor not being a dick, being pleasant and being nice and saying, look, we're not here to railroad you into various things. We want to work with you. We want partnership and everything else. Yeah,
I look at 9 Story. We were in that place. We were in that for 10 years. You can't be in a company for 10 years and not get along together and share a vision. You're not. There's no. I would can't imagine anything that would involve like a real hostile takeover an entertainment company. You have to go in and work with these people, and be very very collegial. It's I mean the investors selling themselves in as much as the company's selling out to an investor. It's you want to be able to be sure that the money people are well aligned with you, and that you get on with them, and you have a similar vision.
And do you have it's like a template for getting involved in a company? Again, thinking of Nine Story, when you invested into them, and then you acquired animation studios around the world, a publishing company, and things like that. Do you have like a roadmap to grow?
Not really. I think again, this comes back to the serendipity point, right? When we Zelig, myself, invested in Nine Story. I mean, that's an interesting fable, because Vince was about to sell off to a much bigger entertainment company, and we kind of went in there at the last minute and scooped them up. And part of the way we did that is that one thing I said to Vince is that, okay, you've got to sell it to this big company, and presumably you have to be signed on for like quite a while. I said, yeah, I got a 3-year contract. I said, well, be prepared to hate the next 1,000 days of your life, because it's going to be grim. How's that for a sales pitch?
No, very good. Yeah, that's not aggressive at all.
That's not aggressive. But it was really selling him and people like him the idea of that, don't take all your chips off the table. There's so much more to play for here. Like, sell a bit, have us we can co-invest with you, and you'll end up with something much, much bigger. And I think, and for Vince Camiso, it paid off in a huge way. Vince and the management team. But it's funny, the Nine Story thing, because again, serendipity and luck. One of the things Vince wanted to do was expand the production they were doing. So they weren't doing a CGI production at all. He wanted it to be CGI. It just so happened that the year prior, I started working with Brown Bag Films in Dublin as a consultant, and then Cathal Gaffney asked me to join the board, which I did. So I was a board member of Brown Bag when separately Zelnick and I ended up buying a majority share of Nine Story. So it turned out that I happened to have privileged access to a company that could expand materially the production capability of Nine Story in CGI, which is Brown Bag Films in Dublin, which is probably the leading CG animation studio in Europe at the time. And so it was a funny story, because I went to the next board meeting. I said, and I said to the Nine Story guys, like, okay, look, this is going to go one of two ways. Either this works, great, or it doesn't, and I get fired from Brown Bag. So it turned out it was the latter ultimately. So because I went to I knocked at the door of the Brown Bag board of directors the next time we had a board meeting. And I said, okay, taking off my board hat for Brown Bag, putting on my executive chairman hat for Nine Story, we would like to purchase this company. And they said, okay, Neil, thank you very much. Please leave the room. So I did. And they started talking about it. And I would go in. So the next few months, I'd be going to Dublin for our monthly board meetings, and having meetings just about normal board stuff. And they said, okay, Neil, time for you to leave, because they wanted to talk about this thing about the Nine Story approach. And so I had to leave. So I sat in the lobby of Brown Bag a lot and got to know the receptionist really well. We just chatted, and we put a bid in, which was refused. It was turned down. And Cathal Gaffney, bless his heart, he came to me and said, Neil, you're a great guy. We really love you, but you have to go, because you're not. And I said, look, I get it. I'm no longer an impartial board person for Brown Bag, because I'm part of Nine Story, and you've turned down our offer. Fair enough. So I left. And I went back to Nine Story. I said, well, thanks, guys. That worked out really well. So after a few months, we took another run at it, and it worked. We got it done. And so I went from being a fired board member to being executive chairman of the whole thing, including Brown Bag. And so that was the next thing. So I went in, and they were all kind of like, I said, it's okay. It's fine, guys. You did what you had to do, but I will never forget it.
Well, there you go. Lesson Lesson learned.
Yeah, no, it was a funny thing. So to your point about how you grow these things, I mean, again, you don't having the connections and all that, and having a privilege that the brown bag thing just had to be a happy set of circumstances where it fit in with what 9 Story wanted to do, and I was able to eventually make that happen. So
By being fired.
And then eventually acquired the company. And the next run-in was, we did a bid again. It's like, I'm having nothing to do with this. And they went in, and maybe it's because I had nothing to do with it. It was successful. And it got done. But it was, that happened about a few months later. But so we acquired 9 Story in 2014. In 2015, we acquired Brown Bag. So it was a really good start for our investment in that company.
And did you go on to sort of buy other businesses or invest in other businesses that could help support the production and distribution business?
Yeah, so we ended up buying during the sugar rush years of the streaming boom, and as we're back in a few years back, as you will all remember what that was like. We were having a problem with quality control around third-party studios who were using in the Far East and India and stuff like that. And so we had identified a studio in Indonesia that we had worked with a lot, that we really liked and respected, and we approached them. I wasn't part of that. It was Cal Hall who really led that, and we acquired that studio in Indonesia, so it became part of Brown Bag as well. And then we didn't do a lot. Oh, and then we acquired Under the Blue, which is in a New York production company, and that was Angela Santamaro and her colleagues. And that was a company I worked with at Decode. We did Super Y together, so I really knew her well. But that was Vince's relationship. So we built the company that way. Being Brown Bag and Out of the Blue and our Indonesia studio was the sort of the biggest parts of that.
Okay, interesting. And you obviously, 9 Story Group's been sold to Scholastic now, and it sounds like it was a very, very good deal. And I'm assuming you're now out of all that. Yeah. So I was part of the Zelnick investment group, and I found that Zelnick came to me saying in 2013 and said, we're looking at expanding into production companies because we want to ride the streaming boom. We think production companies will be big winners in this, so please go find us something. And that's when I went to. I knocked at a few doors, but included 9 Story and Vince Caniso, and that's the one that stuck. Okay.
And that was a really good run, and it was good. They had a long relationship with Scholastic, and again, I give full credit to Vince to that because he'd been working with them about 20 odd years doing Magic School Bus and things like that, and that was a really great marriage, and I think that they'll do really well together. Really pleased with that. So that closed in June.
This podcast is made possible thanks to the support of the awesome Liberi Consulting. Liberi offers specially tailored industry-related training courses. Check them out at libericonsulting.com. That's LIBERI consulting.com. You can also find links to their fantastic courses on the Festivus website.
And so, I'm sure you're not just sort of kicking back watching the clouds go by, but looking at the industry today and the challenges it's facing, audience, I don't know if they're fragmenting or have just run for the hills and they're all over on sort of YouTube and playing around on Roblox and doing other things. Where do you see the opportunities these days?
Well, I would say not in IP companies. It's companies that make stuff and own programming. I think that is, as you say, it's very, very challenging. I don't know if it's coming back. I don't think it is coming back. But I think it would be adjacent business services. So I'm looking at companies that work with media companies, but aren't media companies themselves. So I would say, as they call, picks and shovels businesses or business services. So I'm looking. I've got 2 or 3 discussions going with media companies like that, media business services companies that work in media. And I can't, elaborate beyond that, but it's something I'm very interested in as well. So that's what I'll be doing. But I don't think I'd ever do anything that's the size of the scope of 9 Story again. I don't think there's the opportunity to do that in terms of that kind of play is being there, done that. And I don't think the industry is in any position to replicate that.
No, it's in interesting times, isn't it? I mean, it feels a little bit like, going back to what you did earlier on in sales, because for the last, I don't know, 6-8 years, there's been this ability for a studio or a producer to go to a streamer, a Netflix or an Amazon or whoever, and pitch your idea, and they go, "Oh, that's lovely. Here's a check. Go and make it." And that's all you have to do. But back in the day, and I wonder if it's coming back to a certain extent, you would have to put your financing together like a jigsaw. So you'd go to your home broadcaster, the BBC, ITV, Channel 5, whoever it is, and they'd give you a percentage of your budget, and then you'd have to go and do pre-sales and stuff. Do you see your old skills coming back into play at all?
Well, it's funny you say that. I think it's very much, Back to the Future. It is very much the jigsaw, putting these bits together. And I know you've had one of your the podcasts you did with Alex Wiseman, and she's the master of this. She's been brilliant doing this for 9 Story. But it is cobbling these bits together. But I think that's going to be very, 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 very difficult. And it is interesting, is what you said, like back in the sugar rush days of the streamers, they say, here's a check, go, they push up the budgets and say, here's a check, go make it for us, all done. That's great. And they want to own everything. And of course, now what they're getting to is that as they get constrained about what they can spend because their debt levels, they're saying things like, "Oh, actually, we can work with partners, linear partners. We can window, So they're really acting more and more like broadcasters as we used to see it, back in the day, in terms of territory rights, and having made first windows for BBC and things like this. They're getting back to. It's kind of the business is going back to kind of the way it was back in our day when things would get cobbled together. But I think it's going to be a really tough business as these major broadcast companies are constrained by their cable bundle model falling apart, which was really where the money came from, and this the debt loads they carried in order to build their audiences, the streamers. I think it's very, very tough. So I would say anybody coming into the business now is that be very flexible about how you get in. Like, don't think you're going to come in like, okay, I want to be a TV distribution person. That's it. If you look around the edges of the business and find out what's working, and go and do that.
And when you say around the edges of the business, can you define that a bit more? Well,
I guess it would be aspects of media that are maybe not as obvious to people, and one of the mistakes I made, I think, when I came into television distribution, I knew nothing about business at all, and I decided, right, well, I was very much into writing and journalism and all that kind of stuff. I knew nothing about business. So right, I should go get myself an MBA. So I signed up did all the tests and all that stuff, and I started doing an MBA. I did that for 4 years part-time. It absolutely destroyed my 20s. Like, I totally boxed myself in for a number of years. And that was a bit of a mistake because I probably missed some career opportunities, like getting out of LA and all that kind of stuff. I probably could have ended up working for a talent agency for a while had I not done that. But I was so wedded to this. So I think it's one of the things that don't move too quickly into how you set up your career. In terms of don't box yourself in. Don't go down one path that so defines you and constrains you that you're not flexible to do something else.
And don't be scared, I think, is the other thing. Is if an opportunity comes along, if you think it's right, go for it.
Absolutely right. Yeah, and don't define yourself by a very narrow subset of a business. Like, you think you're going to be a writer. We'll get into other things. Find other things to do around that. If you just want to be around the media business, to try other things. Learn those kind of skills, because you never know what lights your fire. I mean, I ended up being in training as a journalist. Really wanted to do that more than anything, and I ended up really loving the television business. You don't know what you're going to like, especially when you're younger. You just don't know where your skills are going to be.
No, I think it's come up a few times in these podcasts. People have said one of the reasons they love, certainly the animation industry and the kids industry generally, is for the most part, everybody's really nice. You can you got to work hard, obviously. And, you were talking about traveling to, I think you said there were one-stick towns, which is that define a one-stick town?
It's a single television channel.
Okay,
so it'd be like Thunder Bay or Sudbury in Ontario, or like little places like this. So we used to call them one-stick towns, like single TV broadcasters.
But you had to go visit them. You had to go, as you said, you had to travel around. You had to go there. You had to meet them. You had to sell the shows. And even now, I mean, I was talking to somebody earlier today about the fact that we do have, although we can't, as a British studios, we can't actively pitch at things like Cartoon Forum and Cartoon Movie. You should still go, because that's where everybody is, and you've got to be somewhere to make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely right.
Yeah. Okay. Well, coming to the end of all this now. Your career spanned almost every facet of our industry, and at a very, very high level. And as we were saying earlier on, some key executives, although you won't accept responsibility, but I think they have a lot to thank you for. Looking back over your career, what do you think the best piece of advice is that you were ever given?
I can't think of any particular thing that I was told. I absorbed it from like lots of people who I admired and respected. I would just pick up little bits from things. But what I would say, what I've learned over the years is that the value of listening rather than speaking. And one of my favorite things to say to people is that you've got 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth. Use them in that ratio.
It's very, very good advice. Yeah. Really good advice.
And I'm sure you and I could think of many examples of people that don't do that. But when you're talking, you're not listening, you're not absorbing, you're not understanding, and it's an easy trap to fall into.
No, absolutely. And Ian, you saying earlier on that things are a bit tough at the moment, and we're probably not going to go back to the old way of doing things and the old way that young people engage with media. Would you encourage someone to enter the industry right now?
I would encourage someone to enter if they're very flexible in what they ended up doing, because they don't know what they're going to like and what they're going to be good at. I mean, this is like that was my story. I thought, when this guy offered me a job as a TV salesman, I thought, oh, salesman, ew, this is like not something I want to do. Like, who wants to be a salesman? But it turned out I was pretty good at it. And you just don't know what you're going to be good at. You may have especially if you're younger, you have a preconception of what you want to do and what you'll be good at, but you don't really know. You don't know anything. You just don't know what you're going to be, you're going to excel at, And this is what, I guess that would be my main takeaway for someone young coming into the business. Try everything, because you just don't know what you're going to be good at and what you're going to like, because you don't know what you don't know.
No, that's very, very true. Neil, thank you so much. I know you're crazy busy, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time to do this with me. And it's great to chat to you as always.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.
Great wisdom and wonderful advice from someone who really does know best. Our eternal thanks to Neil for his time and insights. I think we'll need to get him back for a follow-up chat soon. Plenty more to discover. A new episode will be following soon, so please subscribe, rate and review, and generally flatter our egos. As always, my undying gratitude goes to Janet Balmforth at Liberi Consulting for her incredible organisational skills, to Julian Scott at Film London for his charm, wit and talent as our host. Find out more about Film London at filmlondon.org.uk, and to Odilia Sickinghe, as awesome an editor as she is as a development and production executive. Find her on LinkedIn. The show would not happen without them. Thank you, and see you next time.